Hi, I'm Shelly Tickle, and one important thing I want to tell you about your video notes is that you don't just fill in everything. You got to stop and listen too. So if you need to pause it, rewind it, replay it, you can do that. I'm in room 490, and I will see y'all later.
Hey everybody, I'm Mr. Miller, new to 6th grade, 3rd year at Pacetti. Just want to say, when you're doing your video notes, make sure you are paying attention to what we're saying. If we're saying notations to star something, or hey, maybe a potential test question, you definitely want to pay attention to those things. Make sure you're doing everything just as we say. Thank you.
Hey guys, Mr. Cofield. I'm also new to 6th grade this year. It's also my 3rd year at Pacetti Bay. I look forward to meeting you guys next week. And one other thing that's important with notes is it's not a one-time deal. You are going to need to refer back to these before quizzes, before tests. They're your tool to help you succeed. All right, look forward to seeing you guys. Why study history? History helps explain why things are the way they are. You guys know this. This is not the first time you've taken a history course. It's a story. History is a story. It's a study of the people, the events of the past, the conflicts of the past, the technology of the past. It's truly a story with many, many details. History, it's important to study history because it helps us understand the present and hopefully make better choices. There's a famous saying that says you should learn from the past. Sometimes we do that, sometimes we don't, but it's important to know the past if we're going to be able to do that. And finally, it also helps us understand how we fit into the entire human story. We're just a small blip. Our time on Earth is just a small blip compared to the rest of history. And it's nice to see how we fit in, why the things that we do today came about and how they came about.
All right, Mr. Miller stepping in here for Mr. Cofield. We're going to talk a little bit about how we measure time. If we're going to study the past, we have to know when these events take place. How do we reference them? First one, and you should all be familiar with this, is a decade, 10 years. You got 10 fingers, 10 years. Oftentimes, when you hear of decades, people usually refer to it maybe when they grew up. I'm from the 90s. My dad grew up in the 50s. Those are more modern terms, of course. We're going to be looking at time way further back in history than that. All right, next up on the list is a century. That is 100 years. Think of 10 times 10. And you can see here in the notes and on the PowerPoint, you can see the little multiplication sign that just popped up. So 10 times 10 is 100. That is a century. And you'll often hear people refer to things like the 1800s, the 1700s, the 1900s. They're referring to a century. Next up is millennium, 1,000 years, very, very long period of time. 1,000 years is a millennium. You may not hear this term very often, but when we're looking back at history at thousands and thousands and thousands of years, that term millennium will come up quite a bit.
All right, so when we're measuring time, an era is a large period of time put together with all the events of that period being similar. They all happen kind of the same. One of the ways we can look at that is that here is a Greek building, Greek architecture. And we have that era marked by how all the architecture looks about the same. And then you could go to a different era, which would be the medieval time period. And that it's marked by its own individual characteristics. That era would be marked by kings and queens and knights and castles and all that goes along with that way of life. We could say we live in an era that is a technological era. We have lots of technology in all kinds of forms in terms of medicine and computers and even our buildings and all kinds of technology that we have that wasn't available many eras ago. So era is a large period of time. But when we're measuring time, there are lots of ways to measure time. We talked about years, but we could also measure it in seconds, like how fast can you run 50 yards? That would be in seconds. We could also measure it in months. How long, what happens in this month? How long is it till your birthday? How long is it till Christmas? So we can measure it in months. But then we could also measure it in terms of years. And years is usually the best way for us to measure because we're usually talking about smaller periods of time and things that have happened. So let's look at that. That's what historians use to measure on a timeline. So here's a timeline that we have right here. And if you'll notice, there's a 1 in the middle. There's no 0 because this is not a number line. This is a timeline. And time counts either forward or backwards from number 1. So if you're going into the future, the numbers get larger. And that's the period of time that you're most familiar with. But if we want to go back in time, the numbers get smaller. Okay? So that's the way that the timeline works. But the timeline had to have a beginning and an end. And where did we start? So the timeline was invented at a time when the Roman Catholic Church was in charge of everything. They were in charge of the government. They were in charge of social things that people got to do. They were in charge of how the king reacted and what the leaders did. They were just in charge of everything. And so one of the things that was very important to the Roman Catholic Church was the birth of Jesus Christ. And so he was established as the center of this timeline. And anything that happened before he was born, we label that with BC, before Christ, because it's before Christ was born. But anything that happens after Jesus was born is labeled AD, in the year of our Lord, and it's Anno Domini, which means after the birth of Christ. Now, a lot of people think that it means after death, but if we say that's after death, they say Jesus was 33 years old when he died, and so what do we do with the 33 years in the middle? The reason AD is confusing for us is because it's Latin, and we don't speak Latin anymore, but AD is an abbreviation for Anno Domini, which means in the year of our Lord, after the birth of Jesus Christ. So the Roman Catholic Church, that's where they put Jesus. However, as time rocked on, not everybody wanted Jesus to be the center of the timeline. They didn't want the religious way of referring to the timeline to be the only way of referring to the timeline. So they came up with, and by they, I mean scientists and mathematicians and a lot of really academic kind of people, they came up with BCE, which is before the Common Era. And then they came up with CE, which I'm covering up CE there. They came up with CE to refer to the Common Era, which would be after the birth of Jesus. Now, the birth of Jesus is still the center of the timeline. It's just, do you want to refer to it with a religious way or a non-religious way? If you would, please put a star right now on Anno Domini, in the year of our Lord, for after the birth of Christ, because that is one of the most confusing things for a lot of people, not just 6th grade students. Even a lot of adults think that AD means after death, and that's not the case. It's actually Latin for in the year of our Lord. All right, guys, there you go.
Okay, now we're going to talk about digging up the past. So you have a chart in front of you, and we are going to fill in the chart in its entirety. Your tool of history is artifact. The definition of an artifact is an object made by people. So this is where you're probably going to need to pause the video so that you are able to draw an example of an artifact. We need 2 examples, or you need to list them. So anything that is made by people can be listed or drawn there. And we are giving you a non-example. Bones and see the foot imprint within the stone. I don't want to say what that is yet because that's coming up and I don't want to reveal it too soon. Those are not artifacts. Those are naturally occurring. They were not objects that were made by people. So again, pause the video if you need to get these filled in, because we will be looking to see that you have filled in the pictures. The next tool of history is a fossil. And a fossil are the remains of plant and animal life that have been preserved from an earlier time. This is where you hear about dinosaur bones and leaves leaving imprints in stone. So what you're going to need to do here is pause the video again and draw or list two examples of a fossil, and then give 2 non-examples. So something that is not a fossil. So you'd basically be drawing artifacts there. And then we have, did you know? Paleontologists are scientists who study fossils, and archaeologists are scientists scientists who study artifacts. And now we are on to our hot question. So I want to remind you guys, you have seen and heard the PowerPoint that we gave you on how to answer a hot question. And if you haven't, I'm going to give you a quick reminder. Hot questions are very important. They are higher order thinking questions. There are times where we will take these for a grade. Every time you answer a hot question, you always need to answer it with a minimum of 3 sentences. If you're an advanced class, you should be answering with at least 5 sentences. So minimum is 3. Advanced classes should be aiming for 5. Anytime you start out your hot question, you do not use pronouns. You need to restate your prompt. So this hot question says, name one example of how the past influences life today. This is where you'd want to say something like an example of how the past influences life today. But you do not want to start it out with I, he, she, we, they, it. You need to restate the prompt, minimum of 3 sentences. And an example of how the past influences life today, I'm going to give you an example, and you cannot write this. So if we see that, we're going to make you redo it. An example would be Alexander Graham Bell. He invented the phone, and think of how the phone has influenced our life today. I mean, we no longer have to stretch the cord from the kitchen all the way into the bedroom to go talk to your friend. You now have cell phones. Okay, so we're going to be checking those hot questions. Make sure they are done properly. And if you have any questions, then you need to message your teacher. Otherwise, that's it. Bye, guys.
Hi, I'm Michelle Hodges, and I am a 6th grade world history teacher here at Passetti Bay Middle School. My team and I use a method called flipped learning. So historians, and that's what we call our students, historians, or sometimes we call you kiddos. I'm going to show you what we do in flipped learning. And so flipped learning is where we make videos. My team, all the world history teachers together, will make these videos for you. You will watch the video, and as you watch the video, you will fill out notes. Now, my team in just a minute is going to introduce themselves and give you some hints about how to take good notes and how to get that done. So, distance learners, we like to call you click kids too. So sometimes I might refer to you as click kids because you're at home clicking through the things and you're not here in the bricks at school. So one of the things that's going to be good for you is to print this packet and have it in front of you and be able to take your notes because you need the information. I'm at school and the bells are ringing, so that's what we're hearing. So let's just keep going. Print your packet and have it in front of you to take your notes. So the printable packet is in the materials section of your course. So hopefully we are all finding that information. You're looking through that. There are videos to help you in the video section. Hopefully you've already found that. But this is where you're going to start for your first video notes. This is chapter 1, lesson 1, what is history? And it matters because, and I think somebody else will mention this a little bit later, because we need to know about this. It tells us what's going on, and what's going on in our life today is based on what happened in the past. So again, my name is Michelle Hodges. I am some of your world history teachers, and lots of kids are watching this video. So I'm Mrs. Hodges. And now the rest of my team is going to introduce themselves to you. You can ask any of us any question anytime. So anybody that sees this video, and if you see any of us in the hallway, because both kids are watching this, brick and mortar kids and our Click kids. So both sets of students are watching this video. If you see any of us in the hallway, feel free to ask any of us any question because we will know the answer for you. And if we don't know the answer, we will find somebody who can get that for you. All right, I'm super excited for our new year and then our adventures in world history. So let's get to the fun stuff. Meet my team.